Johnny and James.
They are easily led.
Welcome back to Easily Led, the podcast that fills your ears with wargaming goodness. I'm Johnny from Johnny Watson Gaming, and I'm here joined with James, aka Scruffy Crow. James, how you doing, mate?
All good, all good. Glad to be consistently making a second episode.
I can't believe that. Yeah. Number 2. Can you believe it? Yeah, we've actually got our asses in gear and sat down again.
Yeah.
So, James, do you want to give us a little quick run through of what we're going to be chatting about today?
Okay, so as ever, we're going to have a little chat about what's different and new. Then we're going to talk about our main topic today, which is going to be how we think 3D printing has affected, will affect the hobby as a whole. So apparently people didn't appreciate the clickbait title, so we're not going to say, will 3D printing destroy the hobby? We're going to say, yeah, like, for real, what do we actually think the effect's going to be?
But we might do a clickbait title. Who knows?
We might do a clickbait title anyway. We might do 2 separate versions, one for people who like clickbait titles.
Yeah.
One for people who like really boring titles.
There definitely is 2 camps on that. It's crazy.
And then, once we've given our final thoughts on that, then we will have a weekly recommendation, like usual. I say usual, so it's only the second time we've done this. So, yes.
Yeah, perfect. Cool. All right then, mate. So, James, what have we got then for the news? Let's get straight into this.
Well, the thing I wanted to talk about this week was the obviously the new Kickstarter from Duncan Rhodes for his Too Thin Coats paints. Yeah.
I mean, it's like flown, hasn't it? It's absolutely insane.
I mean, I know he had a pretty good following. I mean, coming out, those videos were very memeable, and he got a lot of even sort of people who weren't that bothered with Games Workshop followed those videos. I mean, even I watched a couple, and I really don't tend to watch painting tutorial videos because I'm terrible.
Oh, he did well. I mean, let's just recap here for the audience as to it. So for those of you who don't know, Duncan Rhodes from GW back in the day when he was doing his YouTube for them guys, has come up with a new paint range, and he's obviously put that onto Kickstarter, and I think he was trying to get around about what, I don't know, it was like 30k or something like that. It was something really simple.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. So he was after £36,485 apparently.
Yeah, so that's obviously what he thinks it would have cost him to get this underway. And James, how much is he at the moment?
We are on 827,000.
It's absolutely unbelievable. I mean, if there's ever a time that Duncan Rhodes has got to be saying thank you to GW, it's right now.
Oh yeah.
I mean, God, the fact that he was the face of their YouTube for a good few years has done him so good, so proud. Yeah, no, fair play to him though. He's obviously worked pretty hard at it. So,
but I mean, on the flip side of that, I don't think that Games Workshop would be launching painting tutorials as like content and essentially selling them, which is what they're doing now with this Warhammer Plus subscription you can buy. I don't think that their painting tutorials and their sort of channel as a brand would have been as saleable as it is now without him. I think he made that content for Games Workshop and got people interested in it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the ins and outs and whose idea it was, but he certainly was. He had a very sort of strange, charismatic way about him that really sort of everyone seemed to take to as. And he's doing it as well on his own YouTube channel as well, isn't he? He's doing something basically very similar.
Yeah, it's I think it's a sort of a mixture. I think it's called the Duncan Rhodes Painting Academy. I've not really looked into it. I think there is some free content, but it's a sort of subscription type, patron type deal, and you can sort of watch it. But it might be something I even check out. But as I said, I don't tend to watch painting tutorials, but I am tempted to pick up some of their paint because I think he painted the old Games Workshop style way, which is the way I was taught to paint. So dark to light, if that's the way it works, then I might actually be tempted to pick some up. So I'm still in the market for a new paint range. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think you should do it, and then give us a report as to how you feel about them. I mean, blimey, I mean, people are spending enough money on them. I mean, even going on the Kickstarter, maybe if you're that sort of interested in it.
Maybe. I mean, the thing that's put me off is that you have to buy a lot of paint at once to make a decent saving. So it's 41 quid for 15 bottles of paint, which seems like a lot. 41 quid on some paint seems like a lot in all one go for someone who normally buys paints 2 or 3 at a time. But it's actually
so I'll do the exact same thing. I'm so cheap. I need that paint. I just get one of them.
Yeah, but it actually works out fairly all right. And then £117 for like 45 bottles of paint, which would be where you want to go if you're actually going to start using the range as a whole.
Yeah.
But I might. Oh yeah. Do you know what? There we go. I have. There you go. I've backed it.
You have. Oh, there you go.
Done.
So we'll find out in say 6 months' time, 7 months' time.
I mean, it's Kickstarter. It might never arrive. But yeah, no, that was an interesting thing. That was an interesting bit. So
fair play to him. Well done. I mean, it's quite amazing, really, in this sort of niche hobby that someone can raise that much money. I mean, that is a lot of money. It's quite something.
I mean, honestly, I think if it was run by Transatlantic Games, I think if they'd launched a paint brand on their own without a sort of inverted commas celebrity sort of face, would they have made £800,000? No. No, he's sold that for them. So whatever they paid him, worthwhile.
Yeah, I would agree.
Because I don't think he was there mixing the paints himself.
Maybe he is. Maybe they've got him locked in a dungeon. And he's just in there, just
grinding up some cobalt and
yeah. How did you make that old goblin green? Make that old goblin green. Yeah. Oh dear. Anyway, James, let's move on. We can fall down a rabbit hole of Duncan Rhodes quite easily.
Yeah.
So, James, let's get onto the main topic then. 3D printing.
Yeah.
Now, this is something that's going to be affecting all of our lives in the hobby, and it probably has touched your life at some point already. And we're going to delve down the rabbit hole of working out what is 3D printing going to bring to the table for the future now and all that kind of stuff. So, James, give us your quick synopsis of what this is all about.
All right. Well, I was going to start with sort of what my sort of link is then, sort of with 3D printing in the hobby. So I've been looking at 3D printing for, I don't know, probably best part of 10 years now, with the view to it being used in the hobby. Now, back then, your option was probably about 500 quid, and you were looking at a sort of the plastic layers, and I think it's called FDM, and then it layered up, and there was Prusa Mendels and rep wraps, and everything looked really chunky. So you weren't getting a miniature out of it, and if you were going to build terrain out of it or props or anything,
I was going to say, when it first started appearing on the scene, it was definitely like you might build a table on it, or a bit of terrain, scatter terrain, or something like that.
Some rocks, maybe. Yeah,
definitely.
So it wasn't cheap particularly, and stuff like there was a method of 3D printing that sort of where you laid down layers of powder, and then there was powder you had to remove. There was always the sort of resin 3D printing, and then but they were all way above the sort of reach of any consumer. So I didn't really think about it for a few years, and it's really only when resin printing sort of became sort of available to individuals that I paid an eye on it, put an eye on it, and that was probably I don't know, only 3 or 4 years ago now. I mean, I don't know the exact dates. The first generation of the sort of home resin printers came out, and the breakthrough was that they used a big blanket light source and a LCD screen that just masked off the bits that you weren't projecting. So I won't go into the sort of science of it, but they basically worked out a much cheaper way rather than using lasers on reflectors.
Yeah.
Of making these things sort of cheap.
Yeah, so
and then just to finish up, the current sort of generation, the one I've got, which is the Mars Pro 2, then upgraded to sort of basically stronger screens, which have taken the printing of a 28mm figure down from 6 or 7 hours to 2 or 3 hours. Which I think that was what then pushed me over the edge this year. And I thought, well, if I'm going to get in, I might as well get in now.
And it's not unaffordable either, is it, at the moment? I mean, you can get a nice little rig for, what, a couple £100?
Yeah, 150 quid would get you, I think, an old Mars now that is more than capable of printing a perfectly serviceable miniature with, little to no layer lines.
Yeah, sure.
And then you're talking about £40 a litre for some resin. So for 200 quid, you could start printing miniatures. I spent about 400 quid because I got, at the time, one of the sort of high, as I said, I've said this in the last episode, the higher end of the cheap printers. So the Mars Pro 2. And then I also bought a wash and cure station just to make my life easier, which was like another 100 quid. And then, bits and pieces to go with it. So that's, but I like a gadget. I like a gadget. So, but even then, I don't feel like an early adopter.
No.
I didn't have to build my printer. I didn't have to put anything together. I didn't have to fiddle with any electronics, or I've never really fiddled with the settings even.
Yeah, so it's plug and play. So
100% plug and play.
Okay, so now that's right. So for me then, I'm coming from the point of view of someone who's never had one, never used one. The only miniatures I've ever had from a printer is from yourself. So and I personally, I'm a little bit scared of them because of the technology, which sounds silly, like you say. I mean, you're just saying it's plug and play, but I don't know. There's a lot about it that puts me off. In terms of the messiness of it and the working out all the supports and this, that, and the other. I know that a lot of the files come with all that pre-prepared.
Yeah.
But it's just in my head whether it's something that is actually an issue when you get going with it. It's just in my head, and I don't know. I'm in a really, I find myself in a bit of a strange position with the 3D printing, because I can definitely see this is where the hobby's going to go down this route, or whether we like it or not. At the moment, companies are out there and producing their miniatures, but I think slowly it's going to transition to buy this file, buy that file, rather than buy our miniatures. Mm-hmm. And it's already been seen really with a lot of the Kickstarters out there now.
I think you're jumping ahead of our.
Oh, am I? Sorry.
On our thing.
But, we'll touch on that in a second then. But just.
But you're not interested necessarily in owning your own at the moment at all, are you?
No, I'm not particularly. No. But I think I think maybe it's inevitable for this hobby. It could be one of those things that you have to have.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, I suppose I dare say Games Workshop pretty much the stuff they produce.
You're jumping ahead, Johnny. We've got a plan.
Oh, sorry, do we? Yeah. You.
Okay, so moving, following on from what you were just saying. So where do you think we are now then? Like, what effects do you think we've? Well, one thing I will say actually before we get to that is that you said a bit ago that it probably affect most people in the hobby. It already has. So Games Workshop, Warlord for definite, and a few other companies like North Star all use 3D printers as part of their production.
Yeah, so that's exactly where I was going to go.
They're an integral part of the hobby, and they have been for a decade, easy.
Yeah.
I've got Warlord cast resin models with 3D printer lines, namely the Telsa turret for the Cromwell. You can see where that's been 3D printed on a 3D printer worse than mine, but older. So
yeah. I mean, I think go.
So where are we now? What do we think is all the effect we've already seen? So you were talking about.
I think the effect that we're seeing. Well, I tell you what. Actually, this is the effect that we're seeing. Funnily enough, I got just a comment on one of my videos literally today, and it was one of my videos that's just looking at the second edition 40k stuff that I'm doing, and the gentleman said, "Oh, yes, it's amazing. This is awesome." Funny, he goes, "Funny enough, I'm trying to create a third edition Warhammer 40,000 army myself," and he says, "But what I'm doing is I'm going to 3D print every single miniature from all these different companies." Okay, so he's going to produce a legitimate 40k army from third edition 40k army, but none of it is going to be from GW. It's all going to be from third party files, 3D printing files, and that's where it's affecting the hobby now already. That's where we are today. That you can create your own army by not going to GW, not going to any of the other bigger warlords or any other bigger companies. You can create your own army by simply picking up some files online from wherever it may be, and throwing it into your 3D printer if you have one. And that's already there. That's here now. You don't have to purchase miniatures from a bona fide company if you have a 3D printer. That's literally here. That's happening.
So you say bona fide company, but I'd say that there are actually a number of. I think it's just a change. I think these companies are like. I mean, some of them. Right, we're gonna have to mention this.
When I say bona fide company, I really mean like the well-known ones.
Yeah, the well-known ones.
Yeah.
Well, I will touch on it actually. While we just mentioned it, is that there are companies that I would say are a bit dodgy at this point, and I think that they were one of the first things that came around with 3D printing, and that was knockoff Games Workshop prints. And I think Games Workshop's going to clamp down on that stuff, and I think they're correct to, because if that was my IP, if that was my designs, and someone was just knocking out cheap copies and selling it off, I think conversion parts for Games Workshop stuff's been around for a while. Alternative, there's companies, but then I think. I'm not going to mention any names because I can't remember the names directly, but there's a couple of companies that really borderline with what they were making and selling in resin. I think that's only got worse with 3D printing, and I think it's one of the times I'm on Games Workshop's side when they're actually suing people. I don't think you should try and sue people, but I think you should say, no, look, that's a Games Workshop IP item. You can't sell it. You certainly can't sell it. I don't think there's too much you can say or do about them giving away for free.
This is going to be a big thing moving forwards. You're probably going to see a lot of potential lawsuits with GW or other companies where people are producing files that basically mimic their work and making money out of it. That's already happening.
I think if you create something from the ground up that looks a bit like Games Workshop, give it away for free, and it's your own work, ground up, give it away for free, it just looks like Games Workshop. I don't think they haven't really got a leg to stand on. But then as soon as you start trying to make money out of it, I think, or it becomes like if you say 3D scanners are becoming a thing, I think if you scan, that's piracy then. That's their model and you've pirated it. I think there's definitely going to be grey areas, but we'll have to see how that turns out. But then at the same time, I think one of the reasons why I like 3D print is to completely avoid the Games Workshop aesthetic. So for me personally, it's not going to be an issue. But I'll mention a few things about where we are now as well. Then, so like you said, things you touched on it a second ago. There's Patreon and Kickstarters. Now, a few years ago, Kickstarters were all about physical miniatures. Now, there's certain Kickstarters that used to just do physical miniatures that are offering the physical miniatures as normal, but also the option just to get the files, just to cut out the middleman.
Yeah.
Do you want the physical miniatures for 50 quid or the files for 20 quid?
Yeah.
And they're basically, one of the ones I was looking at, they were actually charging a fairly reasonable price to essentially print these for you, cast them in resin, and post them to you.
So a lot of them are doing subscriptions, aren't they? So it's like you pay monthly for a number of models that you might get each month.
So that's basically how Patreon works. So I'm a member of a sort of half dozen of the cheaper ones, but a few of the more expensive ones are sort of £10-15 a month, and you get just a huge swathe of minis, like 40 or 50 minis and some terrain and bits and pieces. I mean, I don't understand what the appeal is for those, but I think they're aimed at D&D gamers. I mean, some of them even come with D&D sort of modules.
Right.
So
okay.
You get the mod, you play through you print it all out, and then you've got all the miniatures you need to play through a campaign.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool if you're into that sort of stuff. So it doesn't appeal to me. I said I'm on a few Knuckle Dones miniatures, Imitation of Life. You just knock out a few miniatures a month. It's a couple of quid, and you sort of see what you get. And actually, I don't mind it because it's not a big. I think my bill last month was about £15 for all of them together. So
yeah, so that's not too bad if you're going to get like 100 models. And then...
Well, I'm not. Yeah, that's the thing. I'm only getting for all those combined. I'm probably only getting like it's hard to say 10, 15.
Oh, okay.
10, 15 models. I mean, the price for the 3D models varies so much. I mean, there's such good stuff that people are just doing for a hobby and then giving away for free. But then there's some people that are selling like the 3D sculpt of a dragon for sort of 20 or 30, well, 30 or 40 quid.
Oh, yeah. I mean, those little dwarves you put up on the show last week that you've printed out for me for Stargrave. I mean, they were free, weren't they? Just on Thingiverse.
Yeah,
but they're great little models, and they're full of character. I mean, again, sort of, probably going off the point here a little bit. One of my reservations with 3D printing is that I think you lose the character in a lot of the miniatures.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
If you gave me a Kev Adams Orc or a 3D printed GW Orc, like from the new set now, I'm going Kev Adams every day. Those new Orcs for me don't have any charisma or character or funness to them, and I worry that's where the 3D printing's gonna take that away from the hobby. The character of a handmade sculpt. Sometimes you can't beat that.
No, and I completely agree. And I don't think that hand sculpts are going anywhere anytime soon. I think there's always going to be a market for proper green stuff, hand sculpted miniatures.
I hope so. I hope this doesn't take over. That's my biggest fear, is that this takes over. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, when we say that, we're talking plenty of years before that could happen. But it's
so. I've always been really sort of anti 3D sculpting. I was for a long while, and I think things like Control Z, you can just, if you make a mistake, you can just take it away like it never happened. You can.
But if you're saying if you was the sculptor yourself and you're trying to sculpt something on the computer, you can be like, oh, okay, I messed that up. I'll just take that away, start again. Yeah.
Whereas if you have to do that in a hand sculpt, you have to fix it, you have to evolve it. It changes. And then also there's things like symmetry tools. So if you're doing a face or just a whole monster even, you can just make the whole thing symmetrical left to right. You only have to sculpt half of it, and the other side is going to be identical.
Yeah. Again, that's where you lose the character.
Yeah.
Because if you look at a Kev Adams sculpt, it isn't symmetrical.
No, eyes are all different sizes.
That's the whole point. Yeah.
Everything's a bit wonky. Which I think I completely agree with you. But I think as a few more sort of amateurs sort of move up and get better at it, and these sculptors that did used to work in putty are using more digital stuff. So Knucklebones Miniatures is a good. He does a really weird style, and Alex from Warpblock Miniatures has transferred his style that he used to do in physical miniatures to digital, and it's captured quite a lot of the.
You feel he keeps that character?
He certainly keeps a lot of the character. There's definitely, undoubtedly, something that's lost, but I think that was going to change anyway. So if consumer 3D printers never arrived,
Yep.
we were already moving to a world where 80% of new models were digitally sculpted.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Even if it wasn't printed at home,
They were being printed on a big industrial printer and then
Yeah.
just cast up in resin. Take TT Combat. They've been around for a while. All their miniatures are 3D printed. I mean, you've got some halflings there, if I remember correctly, from Westphalia Miniatures, the little medieval halflings.
Yes, I do.
All that stuff's 3D printed.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And then just cast in resin. I think that was.
And funny enough, they're full of character. Actually, I do like them. They're real nice little miniatures. Them.
So a guy who sculpted a lot of those is running one gold piece on Patreon, and it's £1, as the name kind of suggests, a month. And he's currently producing a weird range of medieval characters based off of Star Wars.
Oh, nice.
So there's like a bugbear, big furry bugbear with a bow next to like a pirate. That are definitely not Chewie and Han. Just a side thing. So yeah, I think that was always going to happen. But I think, so the point we've got to now is that I think companies that were producing physical miniatures, Westfield is a good point actually. They are actually moving away from physical miniatures. So are Avatars of War. They seem to be moving away from physical miniatures and selling more.
I will say
digital
this.
files. Titan Forge as well. Their quality of their physical miniature is always terrible, but they're running about 3 patrons at the moment, producing some actually pretty decent miniatures.
I will say this: the area where 3D printing, I feel, as far as I'm aware, anyway, that is not getting affected by 3D printing quite so much is the historical side of things. I don't see loads of Kickstarters out there for 3D. You get a file for a German army and stuff like that. I'm sure they must be out there. I maybe have not looked, but
no, you're right. You're right. I think this might be to do with the age thing. You're 100% right, because I have looked, and I thought for Napoleonics especially, it stuns me there's not more out there, because you only need 3 poses.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, walking pose, a pose with their arms out front. Yeah, no, it's right.
And you can knock out a whole army. So you only have to sculpt it once, pose it 3 times, and you can knock out a whole army. And it's not out there. And I think that's down to what we said last week, that the historical gaming scene is an older generation. They're A, stuck in their ways, and B, it's the younger guys that are picking up the 3D sculpting.
Yes.
And the
yes.
You have to have a certain technical. You've got to A, want to be technical, and then B, pick those skills up. So if those guys then move to historical as their hobby, their personal hobby, which happens quite often. You get a little bit older, you fall into the historicals. That does seem to happen. And they'll take those skills with them. And then why won't they? Of course they will.
Anyway, it could be a good market as well, seeing that no one's doing it at the moment.
And that is not something I've thought of actually, but that is potentially an industry that could be damaged, I think, by it. But we'll get onto that in a second.
Yeah.
My last comment, and then about where we are now for me, is I have recently picked up Stargrave, and one of the first things I wanted to do is, because I want to get sort of non-miniatures players maybe playing some Stargrave.
Yes.
Is I wanted to build up a full bestiary, all the monsters out of the book, and get models for. Now, I did this for Frostgrave a few years ago, and I spent probably about £100.
What, buying physical miniatures?
Buying physical miniatures, and it was cheap stuff. It was the cheapest, nastiest metal miniatures I could find. It was Reaper Bones miniatures. It was toy spiders.
Just what a range though, Reaper Bones though. You got
to
hand it to them. They're fantastic. But anyway, sorry, crack on.
So yeah, it was this hodgepodge all over the place.
Yeah,
just whatever I could get on the board for the cheapest. I mean, I even some sort of medieval toy soldiers that I used as living statues. But the cost mounts up. Even if you're only paying £1 here, £5 here, it all mounts up.
Yeah, totally does.
So Stargrave, the last few days I've been doing the same thing for Stargrave, except I've been using Thingiverse, and I got about 2/3 of all the miniatures I needed off Thingiverse for free. If no one's aware of Thingiverse, by the way, guys, it's a free site. It's a free repository that you sort of amateurs use to, I've sculpted this, and then just share it for free.
James, it may be worth putting a link.
Oh yeah, I'll get that.
I'll
get the description below. I mean, even if you're not into 3D printing, check it out, see what's there. I mean, the quality goes from 2 cubes stuck together randomly to, really nice miniatures. And a few companies use it to advertise their paid-for miniatures, so free samples and stuff. So yeah, but even stuff like that. One of the miniatures I used to put my Stargrave thing together was a free sample, but it just so happened it was what I needed. And the range is slowly building, and these files aren't going away.
No,
everything's on the internet forever, so this range is only going to get bigger. And I found most of the miniatures I needed for free, and I was able just to print them out for pence.
It's crazy, isn't it?
And that's, you can ignore it. Everyone says, "Oh, cost of 3D printing is the equipment and the time and stuff." It's not, because I've bought that, I've paid for it, I've used it for other stuff. If I didn't have it, I've had to have spent all this money buying a Stargrave, all the monsters like this. So I kind of don't count that as the cost. So the cost for me is just the pence in resin. And yeah, I said I find it fairly plug and play. It is a bit messy, but it's no worse than trying to clean up a bad cast.
Yeah, I mean, you've had it now for a little while. I mean, I'd say you're a seasoned printer now. I mean, you've done quite a lot. I mean, you've done full armies with the stuff. I mean, you've done like you're saying, the Stargrave stuff. You've even done some War Master armies.
Yeah.
So all different sizes and shapes and all sorts. So I'd say you're a seasoned 3D printer. So yeah,
but I mean, I have bought some files, but once again, we're talking. No, I've not spent more per miniature on the files than I would have if I'd have bought them. If I'd have bought them from Bones, and the quality's better.
Yeah.
So Bones is great for what they are.
Yeah.
But you have to get them. Someone has to make them, package them, sell them to someone else, who's then going to sell them to me and post them to my house. That price is always going to be higher than someone selling a 3D file. And at the end of the day, the person making the 3D file is going to get more money from me.
Yeah.
Than Reaper is for doing the same thing. So, and the quality is better than Reaper Bones by, there's no doubt about that.
I mean, I've got a couple of miniatures here which you've printed out for me. One of them is a orc king sitting on a throne, and he's a rather fantastic little miniature actually. I don't know whether you got this kind of on Thingiverse or I can't remember where you got that one from.
He's part of the Avatars of War Patreon.
Avatars of War Patreon. Right.
You can pick that model up on My Mini Factory from the Avatars of War store. I'll stick a link in anyway.
Yeah, do. I mean, he's a quality miniature, and this is, I think you was using the old resin you used, so not on this new stuff that you've got now. But even so, I can't find anything wrong with it. There's nothing to scrape off. There's no mold lines. It's crisp. It's a beautiful miniature. So, 3D printing really it does work. It is very nice, and like you say, it's not, the cost is up front, isn't it? With 3D printing, it's buying the tools to do it.
Yeah.
And once you've got that, I mean, a lump of resin lasts for some time. It doesn't just disappear on the first go.
No.
So once you're printing, you're getting your money back.
Yeah.
You're like exactly like you said. You're not buying on a website. Someone packaged it, and just like you were saying, like that costs a lot of money, especially if you're buying miniatures from abroad.
Yeah.
Now as well, it's ridiculous the costs that you have to pay for things like that, and sometimes to get the really good miniatures you have to. So
yeah, I mean, stuff like Merlton doing the old Grenadier range. If you can't get it from one of the UK suppliers like Forlorn Hope, you're talking, I think I paid about £25 postage last time.
Yeah, it's crazy. Whereas I reckon if you found that file online, you'd somewhat take that file and print it off, wouldn't you?
But
As simple as that.
saying that though, those are the old miniatures that were sculpted the old way, and they do, Milton is a good example. They do really nice crisp metal casts. I've found very little cleanup on the stuff I bought from them.
Yeah,
I don't think they're. I think they're one of the companies that will stay around. I mean, I won't order from them very often in Italy, but I think they are one of the companies that will manage to
again
stay unscathed from this.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's this fight between whether you like the character of a properly hand sculpted miniature to the very clean, crisp lines of a 3D printed model. That it's just it will come down to preference, because a lot of people will tell you that all the GW miniatures now are vastly superior to the ones back in the early 90s. For me, I don't think that's true. I think the ones back in the early 90s are a lot better. I dislike the new miniatures from GW, but
yeah,
that's my personal preference. I mean, so it really is it's in the eye of the beholder, really, isn't it, as to what you like.
And some people will tell you that the stuff that I really like, which was the early 2000s Storm of Chaos type Games Workshop, is also garbage, and that you should only like miniatures made in the 80s. And personally, I think 80s miniatures they look like rubbish blobs of blue tack. So it is. It's
some of them, yeah.
So down to personal taste.
So yeah, no, it really is. It really is. The
next bit we were going to move to then was going to be how we think it is going to affect companies and the hobby in the next year or two.
Okay, so it's this one. I'm gonna lead this one.
Is it going to do damage? Do we reckon?
Well, I'm going to lead this one on to YouTube first of all. Okay. So what you're getting now is a lot more YouTubers. They're pushing the 3D printing. You only have to look at Luke APS.
Oh yeah.
I think I was talking about it on your Discord today. His channel's changed completely. His channel's changed from this is how I build something for no money, out of bits and bobs around the house, to look what I 3D printed. Look at this army I 3D printed. Look at this 3D printer. His whole channel's changed because of 3D printing.
Yeah.
And that's quite plain to see. And he's not the only one as well. There's a number of guys out there who are big YouTubers, and their channels are changing because of the technology they've now been given. So initially, just sort of moving forward, there's potentially a little shift in some of the big YouTubers and what they offer us. So there's a little change there. I think there's going to be a change in, well, we're seeing it already with the Patreons and the Kickstarters. What is out there to be offered to us. I think you might find there's going to be less physical stuff and more files to buy.
With Kickstarter, definitely. I think because of the way Kickstarter already works and the way Kickstarter does really help like the one-man company, and the idea that then they can create these miniatures, get paid for them, but don't have to go through all the hassle of having them physically produced and shipped anywhere.
Yeah, it takes yeah, exactly. It takes all the work off of their. Okay, obviously they've got to create the sculpts. I mean, that's work, yes, but once they've got to that point, you're right. They don't have to worry about shipping. They don't have to worry about packaging, which is that's the hard part of any e-commerce business. Is the storage of the units, the sending them out, getting them to the place in the right amount of time. That's the hardest part.
Well, it's the same with comics in Kickstarter. There's a lot of Kickstarters that do. I mean, comics is big in Kickstarter and Indiegogo especially as well, and they often offer two tiers of: do you just want a PDF of this, or do you want us to, print it and send it to you?
Well, look, I mean, it's a digital age, isn't it? At the end of the day, the world is turning digital, as whether we like it or not. Everything is online now. Everything. Even miniatures are online. You know and you'd think that's crazy, wouldn't you? Like 10 years ago or 5 years ago, that you can create a miniature in your own house.
Oh yeah, yeah. A miniature that's as good, if not better quality than something you could buy from a shop.
Yeah. And so back to the question of where are things going in the near future. I think things are going to be moving very quickly in the near future. I think you'll find a lot more people going to reach out and buy themselves a 3D printer, especially with what is on offer for them to print out. And the costs as well for 3D printers are going to come down because the technology is going to get better. So the second generations are going to be cheaper. So then third generations and so on. So you're going to find the buying cost is going to be a lot cheaper. So it's going to push people down that route as well. I think you're going to find GW are going to jump on this bandwagon. Okay. At the moment, they're not done it, but they're already showing signs with their YouTube channel. So obviously they've never really done any subscription service, but this is the first time we've seen them really properly do it with their YouTube channel. Well, guess what's going to come next? Subscribe and you're going to get all these digital files. That's going to happen.
Oh, it's part of Warhammer Plus.
Well, it could be part of it could be part of that, or it could be another service they do. GW will soon realize the mega money they can be making on subscriptions. I mean, it's just as simple as that. So once they realize that, once they get away from we need to create our own models and build them and send them out, and they realize, oh blimey, if every single Warhammer 40,000 hobbyist was paying us £5 a month every month, when us just giving out files, they're gonna do that.
I'm not sure.
It's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time.
No,
that will happen.
I don't think that Games Workshop. They're like a cruise ship. I don't think they can turn fast enough.
Agreed. Maybe.
I don't think they've got the agility. I think also that they are a miniatures company. One of the things that they've got that you can't do in 3D printing, all you have to do is look at Nagash or is it Ariel, the girl in the big bug. Those big centerpiece miniatures that they've now got one of for every army.
Yep.
You can't feasibly print that on a home printer at the moment.
No, at the moment, but we're talking in the near future.
In the near future, I think also big printers. So I love printing to 28mm or smaller sort of miniatures. Big miniatures, ogre sized. Yeah, I can do 2 or 3 at a time. But big miniatures take days and days, even for my fairly quick printer. I think that home 3D printers aren't going to get much bigger. So I still think that Games Workshops...
They actually might get smaller.
I think they might get smaller. So I think that the Games Workshop's market for those big plastic kits, big plastic tanks, and multi-part plastic, any multi-part plastic kit, anyone making multi-part plastic kits, I think are 100% safe.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that GW will stop making miniatures. I'm just telling you that they will jump on this bandwagon and they will start getting people to subscribe to them for files that you can print out.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
I don't know. I do. I'm really on the fence about that. I don't know. Although I can see it, and now I'm thinking about it. So you pay your £5 a month, and you don't really know what you're going to get, and then it's just then it is just another Primaris captain in a slightly different pose.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's going to be. Yeah, exactly that.
And they could charge.
You'll never see an Eldar model ever.
And they could charge a ridiculous price for considerably less because they've got the name. I reckon, and I think
look, they're not obviously not done it yet, but I can imagine they're going to go down this route because they're going to. Let's be honest, I think a lot of companies will start seeing all these new upstart companies doing well out of this. And it only takes, I suppose, in a way, you only have to look at what Duncan Rose has done. You know, it's his name that's created the money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so GW with the name that they've got, people will flock to it. People have already flocked to the Warhammer Plus whether it's good or not, people are paying
because
for
of the
it.
brand. You're paying anything for the brand, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's what I've seen of it so far. It's tosh, but that's just my opinion.
Oh yeah.
But a lot of people will just go, no, I'm going to get it anyway. I want to be part of it. And they're willing to give up their £4 a month. But £4 a month from everyone who's into the game, that's a freaking lot of money.
Oh yeah,
so much money.
No, I think you're right. Actually, I think one of the things I reckon they could use it for, and I could actually see Games Workshop pushing, is I've obviously noticed that Games Workshop have been for a while now against physical casts of things. Pretty much all the metal's pretty much gone.
Yeah.
And been replaced with fine cast, which is terrible.
The worst thing in the world.
And
ever.
They've slowly been getting rid of fine cast, but some of the places where you still see fine cast, and they're still making more Forge World, but they're still making resin kits, is conversion parts.
Yeah.
So even for the Primarises, I think they've I could be wrong, but they've released. They have definitely released conversion kits. So you get your basic Primarises, and then you add Blood Angels bits. Say. Now.
Yeah.
Could I see Games Workshop releasing that as a digital file? Get the Blood Angels heads, shoulder pads kit, and then but then you still have to go out and buy a box of 30 quid Primaris Marines to stick those bits on.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. That's a really very interesting thought. Yeah, we should work for GW. That's ideas, men.
And then you could still have GW tournaments where you say, look, only GW parts.
Well, it would be because the files have their IP on them, and they'll be so you can't.
Yeah,
use
you
them
could make
elsewhere.
recognizable.
So,
You could make recognizable parts that would be they're all right.
Yeah.
So I think that could be stuff that would still cause you to buy their. So I still think they're going to lead the world in injection molded plastic kits.
I'm not suggesting that's going to go. I'm not suggesting that's going to go.
So anything that added to those sales, I reckon. Yeah, you're right. That could be a source for them. So yeah, but I think the companies. I'm going to start with the companies it won't affect first. Negatively, this is. So I reckon Games Workshop, I don't think they're negatively going to be affected, really. I think there's going to be some knockoff companies, but I think Games Workshop fans are going to spend money in Games Workshop. I don't think it's going to change. I think if you were going to go to all the effort of 3D printing a Titan, you weren't going to buy one anyway.
Yeah.
Same with if you're going to 3D print an army from one-page rules who do very close to the line Games Workshop knockoff stuff, you probably weren't going to spend that money at Games Workshop anyway.
I'm with you. Yeah.
So I don't think they're really going to be negatively affected by it. I don't think North Star are going to be affected, partly because of their crowd. The sort of older generation going to be less interested. They're not probably going to be the people to get printers ever. And the sort of games they do, partly because the sort of miniatures they do a lot hand sculpted metal. A lot of what they do is metal, and I think that's not going anywhere. I think people still want hand sculpted metal miniatures. I think if you're selling them, if you're a small company selling that, I think you're fine.
I know. For myself, that's what I want.
Good ones. I think there's a big difference out there between companies that make good hand sculpted metal miniatures and people who make miniatures that you kind of need for some reason. And I'll get onto that in a second. And then I think anyone making multi-part plastic kits is probably fine. So Perry, once again North Star again with all their wonderful Oathmark, Stargrave, everything kits.
Yeah,
I think
Warlord.
I like printing. I find it easy, but if I want to make a 20-man unit or something, it's just I prefer it to put a plastic kit together. I think for me, the posable options and the sort of actual the physicality of it and the ease of it, I reckon I'd rather put a plastic kit together than try and print.
That's actually very interesting. I mean, I'm just going to go off topic here a little bit, but we're just touching on something there that we haven't touched on actually yet, and that's how it affects the hobby as well. Because once you've 3D printed something, it's very hard to adjust it or to do any conversions to it. As we was off air before we started recording, I was saying to James, I've got a couple of his miniatures that he's printed out for me, and I was just fiddling around with his little goblin with a with a banner, and I've snapped it. I've just literally broken it. But there's going to be no way I can put that back on. That's a dead model now.
Now, it depends what I've broken miniatures before, and some of the because of the way it fractures. Now, if people haven't got any experience with 3D printed stuff, it's quite brittle resin. It's quite hard. There's not a lot of flex in it.
Yeah.
Some of it's better than others. That one that I was using there, which was the Elegoo ABS, like that, I've actually found a better one now. The Frozon 4K grey. I don't know, but I've changed my resin and it's a bit better. It's a bit harder. It's a bit more sort of plasticized. It's a bit more durable. But yeah, if you take a pair of snips to say an arm, if it was plastic or metal, it would sort of deform and you'd like cut into it. If you do that with 3D print, you'll go a millimeter in and it'll just fracture. It is possible to do conversions with it. I mean, I've done a bunch.
It's not easy though. It's like say, I think you hit the nail on the head when you're saying, well, if I've got 20 dudes, I'm going to get them as plastics because I can change them as I need.
Yeah.
You don't want to be fiddling around with hard, fracturous resin when you can just use nice soft plastic that's going to stick together really easy. One cut, one stick, done.
Yeah. 100%. I think.
Well, anyway, that's a little bit off topic there, but it was just interesting that you brought that up, and it was just something that I noticed before coming on to record this.
You're not wrong though. I mean, some part of the hobby is getting a miniature, building it out of multiple parts.
That is the hobby, isn't it?
Yeah, scraping mold lines.
Yeah,
might not be enjoyable, but it is part of the hobby, which is gone. Scraping mold lines has gone as far as 3D printing is concerned. It's just not a thing anymore.
Yeah.
Removing supports is much different and easier. If you look on that orc on the throne enough, you will find some tiny little supports, but 1/10 of what was on an equivalent Finecast model. Because if anyone looks at a Finecast model that was designed originally for metal, at least anyway, I had some Lord of the Rings ones recently, and they've got little vents everywhere. It's a nightmare. But anyway.
Yeah.
No, I think you're right. There's a tactile difference between just having a full, whole, clean sculpture in front of you, rather than basically building it yourself. Okay, so then, still in the near future, I reckon the companies that it will affect, and I think affect badly, is anywhere where you don't like the miniatures, but you buy them because you need them. So obviously no one needs a miniature, but say you want 20 spearmen, and you don't care particularly what they look like, you just want some spear. Say you need say you need some Stargrave creatures.
It's just funny.
But the quality's not what you're looking for. Or you're playing D&D and you just need some kobolds. You just need 6 kobolds, and you don't care if they're a bit crap. So there's companies out there. There's companies that I love, like Alternative Armies, that produce passable metal models, but very little in their range I think are really beautiful. I think the stuff that you really want. I think you buy their sort of miniatures because you need to use them in a game. Yeah,
you flesh out your army, or
they're gaming pieces.
Or they're like things to be killed. In a game. Yeah.
Same goes for TT Combat. There's not a lot that they make. I think in general, like their halflings that they released recently, they're nice enough, but you're not buying them because you go, oh wow, look at those miniatures. You're buying them because it'd be cool to have a halfling army.
Yeah.
And they make the biggest range I think at the moment of halflings to make into an army. And TT Combat are a really interesting one because, and their halfling range especially, is because it is all 3D printed, and it is all cast in fairly cheap resin.
Yeah.
It's not very nice resin to work with. It's got a lot of vents, it's got a lot of mold lines, it's got a lot of flash, and they've got mismolds. I've had a few TT Combat things recently, and I've not been overly impressed with their quality either. Some of their stuff's great. I mean, they do what they do, and that's relatively cheap. I was going to say affordable is a nice way of saying cheap, but It's cheap, it's cheerful, it's decent.
Sure.
But so I bought a Halfling Hot Pot Flinger equivalent recently, and it arrived. There's 2 in a box. They're identical. And yeah, they had a few different molding issues. Some of them you just normally expect. You deal with the mold lines and what have you. But I thought, that's a digital file. Someone has that as a digital file. I could have printed that. I'd have given you the same amount of money. It cost me about a tenner.
Yep.
I'd have given you the same amount of money for that digital file. But I'd have got it. I wouldn't have had to wait 3 days for it to post. I'd have had to wait 2 hours for it to print. And I could have printed it to a much better quality than I've now got it sat in front of me.
Yeah.
So that, as a company, I don't...
Interesting.
If 3D printers became more available, I don't understand what that company's purpose would be. And I think we'll get onto, in the recommendation, we've got companies out there who don't cast in resin. They literally, what they do is they buy files and they get the licenses for them and they 3D print them and they send the prints themselves out to the public.
Yeah.
So I think that companies who literally just 3D print something, cast it in resin, which is always going to degrade the quality because you're making a copy, and then you've got all the problems associated with the cast model. That extra step, I don't understand what their purpose is going to be going forward.
It's interesting. Yeah. I mean, like you say, those sort of one-off miniatures or the filler miniatures. If you've got a 3D printer, you're going to use it, aren't you? I mean, it's simple as that.
Yeah, and I think if you make resin, really nice resin monsters, like Mears, for instance, they're stunning. Like I said, I still think they've got a place. I think art is still going to have a place. I think gaming pieces, companies that make gaming pieces rather than art, that's going to be where it changes. And I think TT Combat is just one that's just off the top of my head. I'm not sort of,
picking on them
at all. But I could see that they could really suffer from something like this. And there's a number of Mantic. Now Mantic, I don't mind picking on particularly because they use that Rastic. They are the poured cast plastic stuff that Privateer Press also use.
Which it's horrible.
So they've got this horrible material that no one likes using, and they've got sculpts that they're not nice. They're functional. You might like them, but they're not. No one's gone, oh wow, what's that model? Is it? And it's they're gaming pieces.
I find with Mantic, I just so want to like their stuff, and I every time I look at their website, I just go no. Oh no! I can't like it. But I so want to as well. It's so annoying.
But if I turned up to a tournament and someone had a Mantic army that was painted nicely, based nicely, I'd be like, oh, that looks, it looks good as an army.
Yeah, exactly. You'd appreciate it. Oh, that's nice. But it's just there's something about them.
And there's the occasional model they make which is quite cool and stuff. But if they say 100% turn to 3D printing, I don't think the world's losing anything. What's it losing? It's losing Rastic mold line cleaning, which is the worst thing in the world. I don't think you're going to lose anything as a consumer. No, and I mean, and with games like Kings of War, you can pretty much use whatever range you want. So 3D printing could really affect them. And I think really, why would you buy their miniatures when you can just 3D print an army? I go back to Luke APS, but I think he did a video fairly recently where he's 3D printed a whole army. Yeah, probably for Kings of War because that's what he plays. Well, he was playing. So it's like, Mantic need to sort of think about that. And he was playing Kings of War in 15mm. I think was one of his videos with 3D printed stuff. And then, I mean, 3D printers work great for the smaller scales as well. But yeah, people were 5-6 years ago, well, 10 years ago. Whenever Kings of War sort of first came out, and to this day, people have been making armies out of pound shop spiders and paper printed miniatures, and bottle caps. If some of the Kings of War players do make Kings of War armies out of anything, if they can find a one pose spearman on Thingiverse for free, and print it out 100 times, then yeah, there's 100% bound to be people who do that.
Yeah.
I mean, we built those beautiful armies for Oathmark out of monopose.
Oh, EM4
plastics.
Yeah.
I've got 60 spearmen probably now in my dwarf army that I'm going to be using that are all exactly the same pose.
Yeah.
And they look great.
And they're still the cheapest model I've ever bought.
Yeah.
Like 2p a model. They're probably cheaper than 3D printing.
Probably.
I'll give them. They win there. They definitely win that round.
They definitely win that round, yeah. And and so if you can do that, I mean, that might bring back the monopose. I mean,
yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, 3D printing may do that. Yeah.
And actually, something to mention, I was going to thought about this a second ago, is that there does seem a resurgence in old school design in 3D printing. People are loving a retro, like as you say, like second edition 40k, or like people are looking at the old plastics from like Hero Quest and stuff. And
do you know why?
Riffing on that kind of design, and I think it's coming across.
It's because the stuff they produce now is rubbish. It's that old stuff is just more characterful. That's probably why it's coming.
Charm to
people. It. Yeah, well, I mean, I'm putting my opinions across there, really, but yeah, that could be a reason. It could be a reason. So with that, then, James, right? So you're thinking sort of near future in the next couple of years. What about if we're thinking 10 years to 15 years, for example? How is 3D printing going to affect the hobby then? In your head, how do you see that going?
Okay, I think there's going to be a bigger divide as well. I think there'll be game systems that'll come up, like companies that'll appear with printed rules. That, I mean, one of them that's around now is one page rules, for instance, that make a rule set and then they produce a range of printable miniatures. And I think that there'll be companies that do that on a larger scale, that they'll become more mainstream, where you buy, the nice rule book, because I think I can't see rule books going anywhere, but almost all of their range is going to be printed minis.
Right, okay, yeah, I'm with you. So you buy into a game, but to play this game, you really need a 3D printer, because all the miniatures will be you print at home.
Yeah, and then there'll be licensed sellers of the prints.
Right.
Because I don't foresee at any point a world where everyone has a 3D printer. I don't think that's ever going to happen. I don't think it's ever really going to get more than about half, maybe, because there's a few factors. One, I've got a desk at the moment dedicated to my printer.
Yep, space.
Yep. You're going to need at least, for a printer my size, you're going to need about 3 foot wide, about 3 foot square probably.
Right, okay,
or maybe like 3x2. You're going to need a little bench, at least, dedicated space, because it does get a little bit messy. You're going to need printer resin and alcohol, which some people are crazy allergic to.
Right, okay.
So that will write some people off. There'll be certain people who would touch my desk over there, and they would just puff up. It'd be a mess. So those people are never going to be interested in owning one.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's already affecting people. These people are already buying casts of 3D printed miniatures, so that won't change. They'll just be buying the miniatures themselves.
Yeah,
I reckon the resin, they'll fix the problems of the resin. It'll just feel like good, resin from a normal shop. It might even start to feel like hard plastic, I reckon.
Yeah.
You've already got bendable resin, so they're just really expensive. You'll end up with much better material. So that's going to stop being a concern. I reckon you might end up with, as we suggested, maybe much smaller printers. One where you can print out maybe 2 or 3 little 28mm models.
Yeah.
The speed's going to go up. So there's already technology on the horizon now that's going to increase the layer speeds, which is going to increase the speed you can print a model. So I think the idea of a tiny little printer that can knock out a 28mm figure in 10 minutes is not
very unrealistic.
It's not unrealistic, I think. So so instead of it taking up like my printer does, where I can do 10, like a 10-man squad in one go, one that can only do 1 or 2, but only takes up like a foot square. So you pour the chemicals are going to get nicer actually. So, I mean, I should say there's still going to be the same problems, but they already make resin out of soybeans, like plant-based other plant-based ones, water-washable ones. So if you had a water-washable resin that had more plastic-like qualities, made out of natural materials that didn't smell as bad, that technology is already moving all of those directions. So if they manage to combine that into one, and then have a smaller little benchtop machine, I think that side, I think the technology will stop getting in the way. So that'll only leave the computer side.
Yep.
I think.
Well, another thing, one thing I believe will probably happen is, like we sort of mentioned, there's going to be a loss of certain companies. If in 10 to 15 years' time, I think there'll be companies that can no longer compete with the market because they're either not 3D printing or don't have the know-how to do the 3D printing. I think you might find some companies that we all enjoy and love may disappear because of it. It's just I don't know, obviously, but it's just a surmising that could happen.
I said any company that makes models. I mean, I said Mantic's a big one that people don't love the sculpts for. It's going to be down to what sculpts people like.
Yeah,
people love old classic metal sculpts now, and there's arguably way better alternatives. So this is just going to be a different alternative, and I don't think that they're going to go anywhere. But yeah, I think there are going to be certain companies that we see as every day that are going to really suffer or change considerably. I think companies that we now know as physical miniature suppliers will go all digital. Or, as I said, or using licensed third parties to print the miniatures. I think if Games Workshop, I was just thinking about this, if Games Workshop do go down the 3D printing route, I reckon that they might go with specific software to them.
Yes, that would make sense.
So you could
do something like that. Yeah.
So I think more than one company might use this, because you could limit the amount of times you 3D printed something.
Oh yeah.
So
you have a cap, so you can only 3D print it once.
So
that's probably what they will do, is make it so it's you can't be multiple prints of, because then you can start selling it.
Yeah, do you remember iTunes when they first started? You could buy a song or something, but you could only make like 3 copies of it or something like that.
Yep.
You could only put it on so many devices, and then iTunes would stop you from making any more copies.
Yeah.
I reckon that's if you have to download the Games Workshop software, and then in the Games Workshop software you buy the models and you print them somehow. Could they put a limit on how many times you did that?
Yeah, it's almost certain they'll do that. They would never let you just print out willy-nilly.
Yeah.
Because all you do then is print it out willy-nilly and sell it to the guys who haven't got 3D printers.
Yeah, so they'd
never let that.
Yeah, so I could see that coming in. And then I think if Games Workshop adopted that, I think other people probably would. So something like, I think you can end up a rise of platforms. I mean, My Mini Factory is already there, but then a rise of platforms like Steam for computer games, but for minis. And then instead of it just being a website, it'd be a platform where you bought miniatures and you.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. Never really thought about that, but
And they also interface with software on your computer.
Yeah.
So I don't think we've mentioned this. So at the moment, what you do is you buy a file, and it can either be supported, ready to print, or just the model, and then you push that file into a bit of software that prepares it for the printer. So you've got a representation of the area you've got to print in, and you can throw as much stuff in there as possible. And I fill the gaps with like an extra hand weapon in there, and put some mushrooms in there, and I can really fill the space every time I print.
I think you've done a video on this, haven't you, on your channel?
I think I've covered it. Yeah.
If anyone's interested, just head over to Scruffy Crow's channel and try and find one of his 3D printing ones, because I think he does. You do actually go through that. You can see what you mean by putting it into this little platform and then working out what the space you've got.
So could Games Workshop, for instance, instead of doing that, could they? I mean, I've already worked on some stuff where they've provided the print layout on the platform pretty much for you. So instead of arranging all the pieces how you want them to appear, They've not only skipped the step where they've supported it, but they've also skipped the step where you have to do basically anything on the computer.
So proper plug and play. So here's your file. You put this file into your 3D printer and press go.
Yeah, and then there's no reason why at the same time the 3D printers won't get better connectivity. People are already working on. So currently, I put the file on a USB stick, walk over the room, plug it in. That's how it's connected. I think that will probably increase. So I think some of the things putting people off on the computer side will start to disappear. But also, you've got to remember that in 10 years' time, there'll be hobbyists that will have never from now will have never not known 3D printing.
Yeah,
I mean,
you're right.
It's a truth that young people take existing technology for granted. I mean, we still remember dial-up internet, but
I still remember not having a phone.
I was out drinking with someone on a work do last week who was born in 2000.
I know, it's mad, isn't it? Yeah.
She doesn't know dial-up internet. So this, I think, it won't be a new technology anymore. So people won't be like, "Oh, I'm not trying that; it's new." It'll simply just be one of the ways people do things.
I tell you what. Actually, it'll probably integrate into your hobby space like an airbrush.
Yeah,
because like 10 years ago, no one used an airbrush to paint their models. Now it's been on YouTube. People say this is the right thing. Use an airbrush, you get better results. This, that, and the other. Most sort of, I say, semi-serious hobby painters who enjoy painting have an airbrush, and it's integrating more and more and more, and it's part of your hobby kit. So when you get youngsters coming into the hobby now, an airbrush is almost one of the things they need to buy, and this will become something they need to buy. Oh yeah, you need that. You need a few paints. You need an airbrush. Oh, and you need to get a 3D printer. So and so Mars. This will work. And that's your setup to get into the hobby.
Yeah, no, I can see that. And weirdly, and ironically, I don't have an airbrush because I think they take up too much space. I think they're messy, and I think they're too technical for me.
I tell you what, airbrushing and painting could be another.
So some of the arguments, a lot of the arguments that people have. But another tool that I do have and don't use very often is a Dremel, because it takes up a fair bit of space. I've even got one of those little hooks, so it just sits on the side of my desk. But even then, it takes up space. It makes a lot of mess. And then I've got an entire drawer full of bits and pieces for it and stuff. So it takes up a bit of space. It's messy. But I think a lot of us own Dremels. I think it's a relatively common hobby tool.
Yeah, exactly. And the 3D printer will become in 10 years' time, like you say, with new hobbyists coming into the hobby, it will just become part of their hobby tools that they need.
Yeah.
I think that just will happen. And like you say, us old timers who decide, a bit long in the tooth, may not ever go down the route of a 3D printer. And say, like you say, the historical side of things. Again, and actually, that's it. We'll talk about the airbrush again here, but if you watch any historical painting YouTube videos, nearly zero of them ever use an airbrush, because it's a more of a younger sort of thing to almost get into. I suppose there's a bit more technology to it, I guess, or I don't know what it is, but
once again,
historical painting.
Yeah, and you picked up airbrushing, and then you moved into historical. So there's other people who have used airbrushing for whatever, and then they've moved to historical. They're going to take that skill with them. They're not going to hand paint 100 Napoleonics blue. They're just going to spray them.
Agreed. Yeah, totally that. Yeah.
I think that's so that as as the hobbyists change themselves, the physical people component change. I think these trends will change. And you can buy. There's 2 or 3 stands now if you go to Salute selling airbrushes. So I reckon do you reckon we'll see 3D printers being sold at Salute?
Oh, almost certainly. Yeah, that's gonna happen. Yeah, so that'll be you'll start getting at these large events, wherever they may be. You'll start seeing 3D printer stalls where you can pick up a 3D printer, because maybe bear in mind by then they might be a bit smaller but easier to carry around. You know, buy your 3D printer here. That could definitely happen. Definitely, that's without doubt. So James, then, I mean, we've been waffling on now about 3D printers for some time. What are your final thoughts, mate? What do you feel? How do you feel about 3D printing and what it brings to the hobby, and your personal experience on it?
I think that for me, it's a good thing. I said I've changed my mind about 3D sculpting, and I think 3D printing has caused that. I think not for me personally, but the prevalence of 3D printing has caused more 3D sculpting, and that's meant that the 3D sculpting's got better and more characterful and more like something I like. I think that it is going to be a major part of the hobby going forwards, but I'm thinking now. I mean, this podcast has caused me more questions in my head than answers in some ways, but I think about how vastly different hard plastic sprues were in the late 90s.
Well, funny, yeah, I'm dealing with them now. Fun enough with my little 40k project,
and how far they've come. Like what you can do with them now.
Oh god, yeah. I mean, I've got arms where I'm picking them up here. I've got arms where you have to rest the gun onto the hand, where it's all sort of molded on. You just stick the gun to the arms as such, and it gives it much more a realistic effect.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first plastic kit that I put together was the Beastmen from Games Workshop, and they were really they had really like curved arm sections with like big flat spaces where you put the arms on, and they could only do little like robot poses. I mean, Games Workshop have almost moved back to single pose miniatures now, because some of their miniatures go together in ways you would never expect. Like, you know, this one piece will have part of a backpack and like part of the face on, and the next piece will have like a bit of belly and part of the gun, and then they'll clip together like some weird puzzle box. So the and the detail in them is just, you know, vastly different to how it was when I started the hobby.
Yeah.
So that's something that's changed in our time, I think. But it's not. You can still go out there and buy. People are still sculpting in green stuff and still selling those metal models. So I think that's what it's going to be like. I think it's just going to become another arm. It's just going to become another option, and it will put people out of business, but it'll put other people into business.
Yeah.
And I think some people are never going to like it, but then some people are never going to like hard plastic kits.
This is true.
And some people still like miniatures sculpted in the 80s that I think are terrible. So it's going to be an evolution, I reckon. And we just have to try not to be grumpy old men about it.
Change is hard. It's necessary, but it's hard. You know, especially when you think of things fondly, as you know, because we've grown up with the hobby, and you think of especially when you're as a kid, and I look back onto them days. I fondly remember those miniatures. That's probably why I enjoy these miniatures that I'm working on now. So that, we've got to get our heads round that change is going to happen. It's inevitable. These companies need to change to stay alive. Mm-hmm. They need to innovate, because the hobby will just stagnate if they don't innovate. They'll stagnate, and the hobby will. I say it'll crash to its knees, but it won't move forward. So for me, the 3D printing is necessary. It's where it's going. It's a digital age nowadays we live in. So we're not going to get away from that. I do hope, though, it doesn't stop the more malleable, hands-made miniatures. I hope that doesn't become a thing of the past, because for me, they just are so much more characterful, and they bring so much pleasure to my hobby. Mm-hmm. But like you say, I don't think they will. I think
the trick is to keep buying them. Yeah,
that you're right. The trick is to keep.
As long as people are still buying them, they'll keep selling them. That's It's the sort of free market, I guess. This.
Yeah, no, you're right. Exactly that. But it's here to stay. 3D printing is here to stay. It's only going to get
More
bigger.
mainstream, yeah.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
one
Without
one
doubt.
last thing though, I think is that the internet's given us, instead of having a trade magazine with a few companies in, the internet's given us 100 different miniatures companies. You know, all just as many miniatures companies as there are like serious hobbyists in some ways, and that meant that people who had some skill, who had just a one-man band, an artist who could produce a nice miniature, could make that, get it cast, and sell it on their website. And I reckon that barrier, that's a good thing that we got more options. And I think that 3D printing and home 3D printing reduces that barrier down even further. Because now that someone, if they can make a really nice miniature, they can sell that almost directly to the hobbyist.
Yeah.
And I think that can only be a good thing if more people get more nice miniatures.
And it may bring more people into the hobby because it's not so hard to get into it. You know, if you do have a 3D printer, it's very easy to print off a few miniatures, get going, get playing, happy days. I don't know.
And
It
that's a good point actually, because I've seen, this is a sort of a example I've seen a few times, is that getting their kids into painting. They run off half a dozen 3D printed miniatures, cost them a few pence, a couple of quid maybe, and if their kids, one thing I've noticed 3D printing is if I painted a miniature badly, I did one the other day, hated it, I threw it away.
But that's interesting. It becomes a throwaway society because at the moment, generally in the miniature world, everything's quite recycled, isn't it? Because if you don't like it, it goes on eBay and then it gets picked up by someone else. But like you say, you could find that because you can just print a new one. Who cares? Throw it in the bin. Yeah, that's interesting.
I chiseled it off its MDF base that cost me a couple of pence. Because I could reuse that.
Don't waste the MDF base. Brilliant. Oh dear. So there you go, guys. That is our thoughts on 3D printing. Please put some comments down below. Let us know what you think. How are you involved in something you've never done before? Is it something you'd like to get into? Ask all them questions. James will almost certainly be able to answer you anything about the process itself, and let us know your thoughts as to where you think it's going in the future itself. So yeah, good stuff. Good chat that was, James. Good chat.
No, it's got a bit longer than last time, so yeah.
Yeah, I think we got a little bit carried away. I hope this is probably going to be a thing for each episode. It's going to get longer and longer, isn't it?
No,
as we get more and more involved and so that quite neatly brings us on then to our recommendation of the week, and we're kind of keeping this one in line with the 3D printing topic that we've had, and it is excellent miniatures. So excellent miniatures. If you're someone who watches any of my videos on my channel, you'll see that I've done a review on these guys, and all I can say is they're absolutely fantastic. So what they are, they're a miniature company that sell 3D printed miniatures. Now, some of the IPs for the miniatures are their own, and some of them are by other artists, but they've obviously bought the rights to sell these miniatures. And what they do is they concentrate mainly on War Master. So I think they do a few 28mm scale stuff, but the main range is a 10mm range, and you can literally pick up any army you want for a War Master army. So they've got Empires and Men, Wood Elves, they've got Chaos, they've got Orcs and Goblins, they've got Desert Kings, Chaos Dwarves, and the Chaos Dwarves are fantastic. Actually,
they're quite nice.
The G-Dog picked them up, and they are so good. I'm not too sure if he's painted them yet. Wait, G-Dog, get on that, because they are brilliant. What other one says? They've got clansmen as well. So Skaven as such. So,
ogres. Yeah,
ogres.
It's a good range. And I mean, I've one of the companies that they've got a license to print for appears is Forest Dragon, and I've got a couple of Forest Dragon armies that I've printed myself, and yeah, they're printing them just as nice a quality. They're using a better resin. They're using, I think they're using a pretty decent, like,
it's top quality.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
These are
good.
These are miniatures quality miniatures they're selling. It just happens that they're printed, which is kind of what we were talking about. I think we'll see more of this sort of thing.
This sort of company will turn up more and more and more, definitely. What I will say is they are on the continent. I believe they're situated in Germany, so you do get some. If you're living in the UK or anywhere else other than Europe, you will find that you get some charges for the shipping. But I can only recommend that honestly, they are worth the shipping costs. I absolutely love them. I've got a high elf army, which is it's half painted now. I've still got quite a bit to do, but some of the miniatures on there are just absolutely fantastic. Please get over there. We'll put a link below.
Yeah,
check them out. Let us know what you think about them, because they are absolutely fantastic, and a great little company as well. I've had some dealings with them in just asking about some of my orders, and they've been really helpful. So customer service as well is really good with this particular company.
Just to cover us in case people, some people might not know, but yeah, War Masters, as Johnny says, is what they specialize in, which is a 10mm scale fantasy sort of mass battle game. So yeah, these are all they specialize in the really small scale miniatures, but still packing. That's one of the good things about 3D printers compared to the old style making miniatures for this scale. You can really pack in those details.
You really can. Yeah, no, definitely. They're really good. So yeah, can't recommend them enough. So please head over and check them out. So cool. James, that brings us down now to the end of the show. So
yeah,
mate, thank you very much. It's been a good one. It's been interesting. Will 3D printers take over the world? Probably. Guys, we'll leave you with that, and we'll see you in the next episode.
See you in the next episode. I think we might have to do another episode on this. So yeah, give us your thoughts. I don't think this is the last time we'll talk about it, but we'll certainly give it a break and talk about something completely different next week. So remember to subscribe, share this everywhere, spam it all around the internet, tell your friends, and yeah, as Tony says, we'll see you next episode.
Catch you later, guys.
Bye.
Bye.